When you turn on a tap or flip a light switch, you probably don't think much about it. It just works. But behind that simple action is this massive, complex system of public facilities. So today, we're going to talk about what these facilities actually are, who's responsible for them, and why they aren't just a nice thing to have, they're a fundamental right for every single person.
Okay, to really get this, let's start with a tale of two very different lives, both happening in the same city, Chennai. First up, we've got Mr. Ramagopal. He's a senior official, his home has these beautiful green lawns, and he has tap water pretty much all day. If the water ever runs low, no problem. One phone call and a private water tanker shows up. Now, on the complete other side of the city, there's Padma. She works as a domestic helper and lives in a slum. For her and 30 other families, there's just one common tap, and they only get water for about 20 minutes, twice a day. I mean, you couldn't imagine a more different reality.
And it's not just them. There's also Supermanian, who lives somewhere in the middle. He gets city water, but only once every 2 days, so he has to buy extra water from private tankers. And then there's Siva, who gets water just once every 4 days. For him, the tap water isn't even safe to drink, so he has to buy bottled water. So you have these 4 people, and together they paint a really clear picture of just how unequal access to water can be.
But this is so much bigger than just being an inconvenience. It's actually about a fundamental right, something that's written into the Constitution itself. So let's talk about how this daily struggle is actually a constitutional promise.
So what are we even talking about when we say public facilities? Well, they're the really essential services that we all need to live. Things like water, healthcare, sanitation, electricity, schools, you name it. And here's the key. Once a facility like a school or a water pipeline is built, its benefits can be shared by tons of people.
Okay, so this is where it gets really important. The Constitution of India, in Article 21, guarantees the right to life. And the courts have looked at that and said, hey, you can't have a right to life if you don't have safe water to drink. So they've made it clear, the right to safe drinking water is part of that fundamental right. It's not a luxury, it's a non-negotiable guarantee for every single person. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor.
And if you think this is just an abstract legal idea, well, get this. That number, 1,600, is the number of people in India who die every single day from diseases like cholera and dysentery. Most of them are children under 5. And the heartbreaking part is, these are almost entirely preventable deaths. They happen because people don't have access to safe drinking water. The stakes are literally life and death.
And look, this isn't just an idea India came up with. It's a global standard. Back in 2002, the United Nations was very clear about this. The right to water means it has to be sufficient, safe, acceptable, physically accessible, and affordable. So just having a well somewhere in your village isn't enough. It has to tick all of those boxes to count as a real right.
Okay, so that leads us to the next logical question, right? If everyone has a right to these things, whose job is it to actually provide them? Who carries this absolutely massive responsibility?
And this is where you see a fundamental split. On one hand, you've got the government. Its entire job is to look out for everyone's basic needs, and it's funded by all of our taxes. On the other hand, you have private companies. Their main goal? To make a profit. They'll provide a service, sure, but only if you can afford to pay for it. I mean, think about it. What's the profit margin on cleaning drains or running an anti-malaria campaign? A private company just isn't going to be interested in that.
Right, so that's the big question, isn't it? If it's the government's job to build water systems and roads and schools for millions and millions of people, how in the world do they pay for all of it?
Well, it all comes down to the national budget. A huge chunk of the money the government has comes from taxes. The GST we pay, income tax, taxes on companies, and also from borrowing money. This big collective pot of money is what gets used to fund all these public programs.
And on the flip side, this is where all that money goes. And you can see it's a really complex balancing act. The money has to be split between everything from defense and paying interest on loans to pensions and subsidies. Public facilities are a critical piece of this giant pie, but they're competing for funding with all these other national priorities.
So let's be real for a second. We all know that sometimes government-run services can be, well, pretty inefficient, and shortages are common, which leads to this huge debate. Maybe we should just hand these services over to private companies. Would they run them better?
You can see the arguments on both sides. People who support it say private companies are just more efficient and can bring in better technology. But then you have the other side of the coin. The big fear is that privatization leads to massive price hikes, which suddenly makes things like water totally unaffordable for poor people. And this isn't just a theory. In Bolivia, when they privatized the water supply, it led to huge riots, and the government had to take it back.
But is privatization the only other option? Absolutely not. There are tons of public success stories that show us there's another way. Take Porto Alegre in Brazil. The public water department there achieved universal access to safe water while making sure prices were super low for the poor. And we've got great examples right here in India. Mumbai's water department actually raises enough money from user charges to cover all its expenses. Hyderabad has massively increased its water coverage and gotten better at collecting revenue. And even Chennai is finding clever solutions like rainwater harvesting and putting private tankers on contract. What this all shows is that good, effective public management is definitely possible.
Okay, so we've talked about the law, we've talked about the economics, and we've looked at examples from all over. Let's bring this all back to where we started, the water that comes out of the tap. Or maybe doesn't.
The hard truth is, while the right to life and the right to water exist on paper, the reality for so many people is still a story of deep inequality. Sure, progress is being made, but man, it is slow. Cities are almost always better served than villages, and even inside the cities, wealthy neighborhoods get way better service than poor ones. It's the story of Ramagopal and Padma, playing out all over the country.
So the big challenge for all of us is to close that gap, the gap between the constitutional promise and the daily reality for millions of people. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. We know that public facilities are supposed to be a right for everyone, but take a look around. What does that right actually look like in your community?